Welcome everybody to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. Today we have interview number 9. But before I get into that, please do remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I come up with more videos. I do interviews like this, talk about narcissism, talk about radical self-respect, and I also want to start talking a little bit more about masculinity and femininity at some point because I like talking about the narcissism, but I think there'll be a point where I want to integrate the whole thing into healthy relationships too. But today we are going to talk a lot about a relationship with a female covert narcissist. And you see, my guest here is Doug. And in the thumbnail, I did say Theodore Teddy Bowers because that is his pen name. But how are you today, Doug?
I'm great. How you doing, man? Appreciate
Living
you
the
having
dream,
me on.
man. Living the dream. It's a pleasure having you.
Awesome.
So you were with a female covert narcissist. So take us back, I guess, to how you met this woman.
Okay, so before we start, I've been divorced 3 times. My first 2 marriages were the mothers of my only 2 children. I have 2 adult children, a female and a male. Those 2 women were not narcissists. They're normal people. My first marriage, I got married at a very young age of like 22 years old. I take a lot of responsibility in that marriage demise. I was just immature and young. It was just not a healthy relationship. We did have my daughter, which was amazing. And, we're amicable to this day. My second marriage, though, was to Paula, my son's mom. I met her when she was only 19 and I was 27. And I was raised Catholic, wasn't active in the Catholic faith. But when I met her, she was Mormon. And but she was in her rebellious stage. She wouldn't care if I said that. She was in her rebellious stage. She was 19. She wasn't attending church. We met. We were having a great time dating. And then about a year or so after, about 1 to 2 years in the dating, she, gave me an ultimatum. And let me just back up and preface that my problem is I'm a codependent, and I have had this string of my life cycle of always wanting the approval of women. I've always sought the approval of women. And I know that goes back to my childhood. My mother and I have had many conversations over it. I almost died when I was 9 months old. I had cerebral meningitis. We think that might play a part in it. If you read my book, which we'll get to in a little bit, I kind of explain that. But moving back, I was always looking for the approval of women. And I was never self-confident enough to be like, I can be myself. I can be alone. I can do my own thing. I'd love to date or have a girlfriend, but I don't need to have a woman to make myself complete. It wasn't like that. So after we had dated for about a year or 2, she wanted to go back to church. And she was like, hey, have you ever gone to a Mormon church? I'm like, no. And she's like, well, I want to get married to you someday. We were talking marriage. And she's like, but I'm going to get sealed in the Mormon temple, whether it's with you or someone else. Again, afraid of losing her, afraid of being alone, I started going to the Mormon church. I did enjoy it, I will say. I have nothing against the Mormon faith. I am not anti-Mormon, just so you know that. I don't agree with the faith anymore and its fundamentals, but I'm not a anti-Mormon by any means. So we started the date seriously. I started attending Mormon church, and then in 1999, I converted to a Mormon. I was a Mormon for 10 years, from 1999 to 2009. For 7 of those years, or 6 of those years, I was married to Paula. We had 1 son. His name is Jared. He is now 18. Amazing kid. As a matter of fact, yesterday morning, he just left on his Mormon mission.
Right on.
He's going to be in Bangkok, Thailand for 2 years. Crazy. We just dropped him off at the airport yesterday morning. And so I got sealed to her in the Mormon temple. And for the first, few years, I was very happy in our marriage. But I don't want to get too personal with her because, she had some issues. She fell into a deep depression. She will say, even to this day, she's stubborn as an ox till this day. And I tried to get her help. I tried to go through counseling, but she was at the point to where my son was about a year old, and she was neglecting me, my son, the house. I mean, it was pretty bad. And still attending church every Sunday, going through a deep depression. So we moved to Well, let me back up. So we were living right near where my daughter was, and things were good. Well, she wanted to move 75 miles away to be closer to her family. And that meant being away from my daughter. And I didn't put up a fight. Inside, I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to leave my daughter. But here we are once again, Doug, not advocating for himself, not putting his foot down and saying, no, I will not leave my daughter. We need to work something else out. I went along with it, regrettably, and we moved about 75 miles away from where we were. And that's when you're in the Mormon church, the congregation's called a ward. So it's a ward is set by your geographical area. So you're assigned to a ward. So if you're living in a city or a town, you're assigned to that specific ward. So we started attending our assigned ward. And that's when we met a couple named Jim and Tammy. They had 2 young children. They were our age. And, when you're in the Mormon church, it's like they call it the Mormon bubble. You tend to hang out with just other Mormons, and you have game nights and dinners and all that different stuff. It's the social circle. Well, we became best friends with Jim and Tammy. I mean, Paula and Tammy were best friends. Me and Jim were best friends. We did everything together. We had other friends too that we hung out with, but we were the sort of the core. This went on for 4 years. And Tammy and I, I only saw the fun, exciting, energetic Tammy. We used to tease each other at church. We used to make fun of each other. She would only call me by my last name, reminded me of my football days. There was nothing inappropriate going on at that time. It was fun to be around her. And she's an attractive person. And, and Jim and I were doing our thing, best friends. And then about 4 years, into our friendship, when things were really spiraling with me and Paula, Tammy and I started paying more attention to each other. And I'm not proud to say this because I am not advocating for this. For the first and only time in my life, I had an affair. And I may get emotional sometimes during this. That's just the type of person I am. Because I don't think I've fully forgiven myself for that. It's been 15 years, and it was something that, I just made a very bad decision. And at the time, I didn't know why I was doing it. I didn't know she was unhappy in her marriage with Jim. She was telling me things that he was abusive and he was mean and he was always screaming and yelling at her and that she was afraid he was going to hurt her. And this was my best friend. And like, if you know Jim, he has a loud bark. I mean, he's a loud boy. He's a lot like me. I mean, they prey on the same type of people. Jim is an empath. He's a good man with a big heart, just like me. And so I knew deep down he would never physically harm her, but I was believing her.
And she was calling him abusive.
Yes. And so we started to have an affair. And this affair only lasted about 6 weeks. And I could really get into the affair, but I don't need to. It was an affair. And there was a day, and this is the defining moment that I will go back to at the end of my story because it'll put it all together. There was a day where we were sitting in the car towards the end of the affair, and she looked at me and she said, she was in a rush to divorce Jim. I don't love him anymore. He's abusive. He's mean. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. And she was just like, we need to do this now. And she got very not forceful, but just energetic and very enthusiastic about it. And I remember looking at her in the car and I said, I am not ready to leave Paula and Jared. And I am not kidding you. She got this weird look on her face, like she had almost become a different person. I recognize it now, but I did not recognize it then. Her mask had come off for a brief moment. And she looked very upset and very pissed. And then in a flash, in an instant, she turned to me with that big smile and said, oh, no, it's okay. I totally understand. The very next day, ironically, they get into a huge fight. They start screaming and yelling at each other. And they is when everything's found out. And I'm going to tell you, I'll just tell you now, so it makes more sense. They found out, and when I later spoke to Jim, her and I had a pact. Obviously, it's not a good pact. It's when you're having an affair. We never would speak to each other on the phone when our spouses were home. We followed that rule. But this day, she broke that rule on purpose. I know now. She lit the match, set the fuse. Okay. When I talk to Jim now, he tells me, I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was walking down the hallway. Tammy's on the phone with me. They made eye contact. She looked right at him and said, okay, I love you, bye. Like, I love you, bye. And he says, who are you saying I love you to? She goes, oh, I'm talking to my brother. He goes, that does not sound like an I love you would say to your brother. She did it on purpose, dude. I mean, I now know this, but back then I'm spun in this web of the next day she calls me. She's freaking out. He's going to hurt me. He's going to kill me. You need to help me. What am I going to do? Like, no one knows about this, and I'm just freaking out now. So 24 hours goes by, and the next day, my son's at the babysitter's because Paula worked like 45-minute drive away. He's at the babysitter's. He's 4 years old now, okay? And I get off of work. I pick him up at the babysitter. I go home, and the babysitter was this black lady who was our good friend in the Mormon church, but she kept it real. She was Mormon, but she was like, she was amazing couple, whatever. But I say that because when I tell you, it makes sense. So I lay on the couch and I get a phone call from Tammy, and I'm relieved because I'm like, oh, thank God she's finally calling me. The last 24 hours, I don't know what's been going on, but they've been fighting. And I pick up the phone and I go, hello. And she says, he knows. And I said, what? He didn't hear me say what, but Jim pulled the receiver out of it. Back in those days, the 4 handheld cordless phones you could get. He had another cordless receiver in his back pocket. He didn't hear me say what, but he pulled the phone out and he screamed in the phone, that's right, I know. And all I said was, Jim, I am so sorry. I don't know what to say. Now he knows it's me. He screams, sorry.
That's okay.
He screamed, Doug fucking Buckle. And he fucking hung up. I mean, this was my best friend. And I had just wrecked 2 families. That's what I'm thinking in my head. Tammy had no reaction whatsoever.
No, it's cold.
All I know is he hung up the phone. I think he's coming to my house to confront me. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about my son. Dude, I don't even remember my feet hitting the ground. I grabbed my son, and all I could think was take him back to the babysitter, get to Paula before Jim does. And so I get back, I bang it on the door. My friend answers the door. She's like, oh my God, what's wrong? I'm bawling. I remember mumbling, my life is over. Everyone's going to hate me. My life is over. And she said, no, it's not. No, it's not. What's wrong? I said, I need to talk to Paula. I need you to watch Jared. And she looked at me and she goes, handle your shit. Nobody's going to hate. She goes, handle your shit. I don't hate you. I don't care what you've done. I don't hate you. Handle your shit. So I rushed off to Paula. I called her and told her I needed to talk to her. Jim had gotten to her. He didn't tell her what was going on, but there was a birthday party planned for Tammy and whatever. And he called her up and he said, birthday party's canceled. And she's like, why, Jim? What's wrong? He said, ask your husband. And he hung up. So I meet her. I tell her that I'm having an emotional affair with Tammy because I really thought, stupid me, that would soften the blow. It actually makes it worse. She looked at me and she forgave me instantly. She literally looked at me and just said, I forgive you. And I was like, what? What do you mean you forgive me? She goes, I don't care about Tammy. I care about our family. We have a ceiling in the temple. We'll move away. My parents love you. I won't even tell them what you did. And now I'm caught between this two of like not knowing what to do. And I was so pulled in by Tammy that unfortunately I ended up going in that direction. So to this day, I mean, Paula has forgiven me, and her and I have a very close relationship. Believe it or not, she is an amazing.
Sounds like she has some good emotional maturity there to be able to handle that.
Whatever she was going through, it like for the time being, it snapped her out of it. We've had talks since my divorce, and we've cried together, and she's told me that I know you tried to get me help, and I'm sorry. And she actually doesn't blame me completely. She tells me that, I played a part in this too. I take my responsibility. We it was a toxic thing that we were in together, and I don't blame you for what you did.
Some good accountability there by her. And not everyone can say that though and mean it too. I think some people might think they mean it and wish they were strong enough to do that, but sometimes people aren't. So they got to be honest with themselves about it.
Right. And she has maintained throughout this day, all I've ever wanted for you is to be happy. That's it. Whether it's with me or with her or with by yourself, but just I want you to be happy.
Right.
And that's been her mantra to this day. And so we've remained close to this day, which has only benefited my son, our son.
Sure.
You know, so I'll get to him in a little bit. So
well, it's good to have a good co-parenting relationship with him. But before you get on to the rest of it, I do have one question for you.
Yes.
What do you think was the origin of your chasing of approval for women, like enjoying the approval of women so much? I think that's important to get into.
It's definitely from childhood. I haven't completely figured out what it was, but my mother and I'm a mama's boy. My mother and I have a very tight relationship. Like I said, and I think I told you in the pre-talk that when I was 9 months old, I almost died. I had cerebral meningitis. If it wasn't for my mother, I wouldn't be here today. And her assertiveness with the doctors and the thing, she told me that after about 1 to 2 years old, you know, she had coddled me and held me and took care of me. And she said, you would not leave my side. Like you would grip my leg and hide behind my leg. She goes, this was the 70s. Daycare wasn't a thing, but we tried. She was a stay-at-home mom. She goes, we tried to put you in daycare just to get you to socialize with other kids. And it didn't work. You would not go. And she said, you know, and then my dad, who passed away 2.5 years ago, right when I was in my separation with Tammy, my dad passed away. You know, my dad's an amazing guy, war veteran, awesome man, wonderful man. But, you know, he had his issues from his childhood. We were not emotionally connected like my mom and I were. He was an alcoholic. He was a gambler for a time. When he passed, he wasn't an alcoholic. He was sober for many years, but during my childhood and my adolescence, he was an alcoholic. So we weren't emotionally connected. So I think I just gravitated towards my mom, and I'm still looking for that codependency answer. I heard something really interesting that it's not the generation's fault. It's not those parents' fault, but when a lot of empaths are brought up to believe that love is earned. Clean your room. You better clean your room. You better do your homework. You better do this or whatever, eat all your dinner. And somehow those parents instilled in you, that I believe this for me, that if I didn't clean my room, they wouldn't love me. If I didn't eat all my dinner, they wouldn't love me. So I felt like if I did the right thing, if I did the good thing, I would receive love in return.
Right. And I think part of it's true to a point when you're a kid, right? Where your parents will give you maybe love and affirmation more so when you do the right things. And they'll say, when you do something I want you to do, oh, you're so great, Doug, for doing this. Good thing you did that. And then you can associate, well, if I make other people happy, then they'll give me love. And
exactly.
That works as a child, but in the adult world, it sets men up for failure.
And that's me, because I'm here to tell you that I went from, I'll call my first wife Lucy. I went from Lucy to Paula to Tammy, boom to boom to boom. I was never in 35 years of my, or 40 years of my adult life. I wasn't alone for more than 6 months at a time. So I never learned how to live on my own, love myself, be good in my own skin, do the things that I wanted to do for me. I used to fear going to the movies alone or going to dinner alone. I mean, like I would never do that. I do that now, but I would never do that then. I was scared to death. So for the first time in my adult life at the age of 50, I was on my own. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, I hear that a lot too, where there's not much single time for a lot of people, for the narcissistic person and the people they were with, for both of them.
Correct.
Both of them were rarely single for longer than 6 months. And that's a pretty common theme I see.
Yes, absolutely. So back to the story, Paula. So we ended up all getting divorced at the same time. Tammy and I got married in October of 2009. And right away it starts. I remember she had an older vehicle that she won in her divorce that I knew very well because I used to ride around in it with Jim all the time. And she got in the divorce. And I remember the first time I was driving with her and her 2 kids, who I loved dearly. They were my stepkids. And I remember thinking, what the hell did I just do? It wasn't that I didn't love her. It was this overwhelming feeling of guilt. And like, what it's like I took Jim out of the driver's seat and put me in it. This is his wife. This was his family. his kids. And now I'm the stepdad to these kids suddenly that I've known since they were babies. And it's like, I felt so uneasy. Like I had made this big mistake. And I'm like, where's Paula and Jared? Like in my mind, I'm thinking this. Right. And I would have nightly dreams of Paula and Jared and her extended family. They weren't bad dreams. They were just dreams of them and wanting to be with them. It was just weird. But from the get-go, Tammy changed. She was suddenly not the carefree, fun person that I was used to being around. She still wasn't public, but at home she was controlling. She was manipulative. She was, her rules, her way or the highway, so to speak. And she set the mood and the tone for the home. But again, I was so entrenched in, we had an affair and I have to make this work. I have to make this right. I have to save face. Now we ended up going back to the same ward that we were in. We rented a house right next door to the church building. Jim is 2 blocks away. So we're all in this little tight space. And it's like, who does that? Like one Sunday it's Paula and Doug, Jim and Tammy. And then all of a sudden it's now Doug and Tammy.
Right.
And people are pissed. People are like, what the hell is this? Like, some people were cool, but most of the people were pissed. So we were shunned by the Mormon faith. We were both excommunicated from the church. That's how we both lost our Mormon rights, or so to speak. There was a brief time where we tried to go back to church, but it just didn't work. And so I went through this every time. It's so hard to explain. It's like when we were in public, I was the best husband ever. She used to call me her Superman. She even bought Superman floor mats for her Tahoe that she owned with Jim. There was Superman floor mats. I could do no wrong. Like I would show up at an event. I have a side DJ business that I've had for 25 years. So yes, she got me the contacts at the elementary schools and middle schools. That's where she worked. And I would DJ these dances, and the kids loved me and the teachers loved me. And I was, Tammy's husband, who's the DJ Doug. People still to this day, I run into these kids that were now adults. Oh my God, DJ Doug, they remember me, right?
Right.
And so it's like, and her eyes would light up every time I showed up to these events or any other events. And she was genuinely happy and dancing along. And, when she was in public, man, she loved to dance and have fun. And she was the life of the party. And I craved those moments. But as soon as we got home, she nitpicked everybody. It was the stupidest, silliest thing.
Always picking. But did that start when you were married or when you got engaged?
We never were engaged.
Okay,
we went from divorce, wait the 6-month California waiting period, got married.
Okay.
We got married in a church building in front of 2 people.
And what kind of things would she pick at you about? Did she pick at your flaws or insecurities?
Nobody could leave their cup on the table. She made these little coasters with our names on them. That's okay for kids, but my name was on one of them. And they had to be on the counter next to the refrigerator. And if you didn't put your cup when you weren't using it, let's say you ice water or Diet Coke or something, and you're not going to finish it all in 2 seconds. You had to sit it on that spot next to the refrigerator. So every time you wanted to drink, if you're watching TV or sitting at the table, you had to go up and get it and then put it back in the same place. So it was like the little nitpicky things like that. It was,
almost like she treated me like a kid in that regard too.
Oh, she treated me like a kid all the time. And, here's a devaluing story for you that's going to floor you. I have adult ADHD. I was diagnosed with it by my therapist about 8 years ago. I'm very forgetful of things. I forget shit all the time. And when I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm good right now because I'm really focusing. But if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I can only last about 2 minutes and then I zone out. And when I zone out, I don't hear anything you're saying. And then I'll come back. So one of the things that I've learned is my therapist has said, ask questions. If I zone out and you tell me a story about your friend Joe and I don't hear Joe, I will say to you, can you repeat that friend of yours again? What was his name? And you go, oh, Joe. Oh, okay. Got it. Most people appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I forget a lot of things. So her best friend had called me to put up a TV stand at her house. I went, took my drill, put up the TV stand, came home. Her friend had obviously called her and said, Doug forgot his drill at my house. I forget shit all the time. I'll never forget. I walked in the door. She's laying on the couch with the blanket over her, and she looked. And she did this shit all the time, dude. She played these games with me where she would not just tell me. It was a guessing game. I walked in the door, and she looked at me and she goes, "Are you missing something?" I just walked in the door, and I go into an inner panic, inner anxiety, and I go, I don't think so. We'll call her friend Carla. She goes, Carla called me. You forgot something. And I said, what did I forget? And she goes, no, I'm not going to tell you. Why don't you go out to the car and try to figure it out for yourself? So I go out to the car, 10 minutes go by. I finally figure it out. I come walking back in the door and I sheepishly say, oh, I left my drill. Now, mind you, she's still laying on the couch. She has not gotten up. I said, I forgot my drill. And she starts sarcastically clapping her hands and goes, good job. You figured it out. What a big boy.
So disrespectful. So
oh my God.
Disrespectful, placating.
Right. And then another time I had asked her why she didn't show me any affection anymore. Like the affection had all stopped. And she looked at me. We were getting ready to walk out the door. And I said, this is probably the most degrading thing she had ever said to me. And I said, I just don't understand why you don't hold my hand, why you don't want to like rub my back or give me men that want affection. And she looked at me and she stroked her hand in the air like I was a dog. Like she was petting a dog. And she goes, oh, do you want pets? You want pets, don't you? You want pets. And I nervously laughed it off, but I was like feeling like shit inside.
Yeah. So, I mean, good to note if that happens to any men listening to this show, or if a guy does that to a woman and you're the woman, yeah, pay attention to those things because, yeah, people forget it and they don't realize it's happening, but it's always like that frog in the boiling pot thing. It's not that way in the beginning, but when you start seeing stuff like that, certainly take note. And before you continue, I do have one more question for you.
Yeah, sure.
So you were saying how it was pretty important to you to make things right and marry this person to save face, etc. I was curious, what do you think was at the bottom of that kind of thinking? Like if there was something going on there.
Wow, that's a really good question. Like something within myself, you mean? Like
yes. Like what would you think? Maybe I'll help you along with it. So what would you think would happen if you didn't do that?
People wouldn't like me. People wouldn't like me.
Okay.
I care too much to this day, still to my fault. I care too much about what people think of me.
Okay. That's what we call the exact nature would be that you want people to think highly of you or to think you're doing well or the right thing.
Correct.
That way you can look at yourself in a loving way.
Correct.
Okay.
That's exactly right. So, this has now been going on and you know, the devaluing. And then again, we're in public and it's love bombing and she's giving me compliments and, you know, she's telling me how great things are, but at home, I'm constantly walking on eggshells. I find myself trying to stay one step ahead of her, like making sure everything's picked up, everything's exactly where she wants it to be. My son would tell you, you know, my family and my son, my daughter, they didn't like the person I was when I was around her. I became a different person. Like a good example of that is, you know, my son would be over for his weekend. We'd be watching a movie or playing video games on the PS4 or something. And we had the volume at a normal level or maybe a little louder. And we'd hear her pull up in the driveway. I would hear her walk in the door and I would literally jump out of the couch, turn the volume down. And immediately the second she walked in, or, hey, you know, how was your day? And is there anything I can do for you? And what can I just boom, boom, boom. And my son would just get up and go to his room. You know, and my son told me later, he's like, I didn't like the person you were when you were around her. And he would go to his room to escape her. And so since we're talking about my son, this is a really hard subject for me. So my son is now 18. I'm not going to try to give you like a bias. I'm not going to try to give you his resume, but the kid is phenomenal. He's 6'3". He's taller than me now. He's straight A's, water polo 4 years, swimming 3 years, choir singer, made it to All-State for choir. They went to Hawaii and he sang in front of Pearl Harbor just this last year. Just a talented young man. But she targeted him. She picked on him. She nitpicked him to death. I would literally catch her staring at him and judging him in silence. This is probably the most egregious thing. Forget about me for a minute. When it came to my son, and the fact that I allowed this to go on still haunts me to this day. My son has forgiven me. He understands I was conditioned and brainwashed. I didn't realize at the time that I was. But I would catch her staring at him, just judging him with those dark eyes. And she would say things like, Jared, why are you eating like that? Jared, why are you sitting like that? Jared, why are you laying like that? Everybody wash their hands. It's time for dinner. So everybody would, even me, would rush into the bathroom to wash their hands. We'd all come sit down, and Jared might be sitting there waiting for dinner, and he might go like this. And she would go, Jared, oh my God, you just washed your hands and now you touched your face. Go wash your hands again. I mean, this kid, and every time she would try to talk to him, it was like an interrogation. It was rapid fire questions. And it was always, Paul and I weren't good enough parents. And it was just, it was insane. It was insane. And then I find out during the divorce, I'm talking to an old mutual friend of hers that she had discarded too. Come to find out, she was telling all of her volunteer moms at the school when he was young that he was special needs and that she was annoyed being around him. He was annoying.
What a smear. I mean,
oh my God. And it's my kid.
Yeah. I mean, that's total disrespect. And you're always guilty of something to them, right? And they love trying to get you jumping from one foot to the next. But if you catch yourself always having to explain, justify, argue, defend, explain yourself, and thinking you're always on the back pedal, on the defensive, because they're attacking you pretty much, right? They're trying to, because the implication is you're guilty of something, and something about your baseline is just not right. It's not acceptable. So you need to be more like how I want you to be, is what they're saying and sub-communicating. So
that's exactly
I pull that out because that's a very common thing. The always guilty of something, getting you on the defensive, making you explain yourself. And if people catch themselves doing that, that's something to take note of.
That's exactly right. No, I totally agree with that. And, when it came to my son, sometimes I would try to defend him. And when I did, she would put the wrath on me. And so I got to a point to where I would just let it go most of the time. But then there was two things that happened. So I'll get to that in a second. But so over this 12 years, within the last couple of years, it took me about 2.5 years to build the courage to get out. And again, knowing nothing of narcissism, which, by the way, she accused me of being a narcissist. That's what they do.
Sure.
She accused Jim of being a narcissist. She tried to convince me. And what I want to say is during this whole time, her and Jim are constantly fighting about the kids. They had 50-50, 7 on, 7 off, right? Which was kind of hard for the kids because they had like 2 homes, but 7 days with us, 7 days with Jim. He's a great father. He always put his kids first. And he tried to put up the good fight, but in the end of the day, he'd give up. He'd give in to her because he was focused on his kids. But I would, how they say the narcissists love the supply, whether it's negative or positive attention. They would fight on emails and phone calls, and he was common enemy number 1. So during this time, he hated me, I hated him, and it was like I was standing with her, and he would email her, and he would finally, his famous line was, fine, whatever, Tammy, I give up. You're in control. It's your rules. And she would show me these emails, and she would forward me emails from him all the time. And she would laugh, and she would be like, he's such an idiot. Oh my God. And she got off on it. But again, I'm not seeing that as narcissism. I'm seeing it, this guy as a tool. I mean, that's right. And so I wanted to put that in there because that was very important. He was the common enemy. And it wasn't until he remarried shortly after her and I got married, and they had their rough times too, but they are still married, Jim and his new wife. He is a stepfather to her 3 daughters, and they are still married to this day, loving life, in love. They have such a great marriage. And, it took him several years until his kids were in high school to finally just say, fuck this, she's crazy. And he stopped giving her all the attention that she was getting, negative attention. And he just started ignoring her. He was gray rocking her. Good. Right? We don't know what that was at the time.
Right.
And that's when it turned. That's when it turned to me. That's when it really got bad for me. Because now there was no longer a common enemy. It was now everything was my fault. Anything that went wrong in our marriage was my fault. It was Jared's fault. It was, whatever. And so that's when things turned worse for me. So there's two things with my son. And these were the two defining moments where I was like, I got to get out of here. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I got to get out of here. When Jared was 16, his mom and his stepdad bought him a pickup truck for his birthday. Used truck, but it was a nice Toyota truck. And he was, he didn't know about it. It was a surprise. And they did not ask me for any money, but they kept me in the loop, which was great in the buying process. When I told Tammy that they were buying him a truck, she came unglued. Their first negativity was, oh my God, what are they doing? What's wrong with you? She said that to me. What's wrong with you? I don't care how good of a kid he is. No kid at 16 deserves a car. I am not going to support this. I'm like, what do you care? This is when I started to finally talk back a little bit. I'm like, what do you care? They're not asking us for any money. Oh, it doesn't matter. He doesn't need a car. I can't believe that you're letting them buy him a car. I'm letting them, whatever.
Very
so the
controlling.
Day came, yeah. So the day came, they surprised him. He got the car. He's super excited. It was a Sunday morning. And Paula said, hey, we're in the neighborhood. Jared really wants you to see his new truck. I'm like, come by. Absolutely. So I go to the back bedroom and I said, hey, Tammy, I said, they're going to come by. Jared wants to show us his truck. She looked at me and she goes, I'm not going out there. She goes, you really expect me to slap a fake smile on my face and pretend I support this when I don't? You can go out there if you want, but I'm not going out there. And that was the first time where I really took a look. I thought in my brain, what in the hell is wrong with this woman? Like, I have been there for everything her kids have gotten. I have supported her kids in everything they do. And she can't even be happy for my kid who just got a used pickup truck for his birthday. Now, I didn't say that to her because I'm too afraid of her, but I'm thinking that in my head. I'm like, whatever. I go out by myself, super excited for my son. The next one is the big one. It's the biggie. About 2 months before I moved out. He's still 16 at this time, maybe 17 at this point. He's here for the weekend. He's doing his homework at the kitchen table. I tell him it's time to go to bed. Put your computer, your school laptop. Now remember, I'm not saying kids are perfect, but I know my kid. He's Mormon. He values his church membership. He just got his first girlfriend a year ago. He hadn't kissed a girl. I mean, he's such a good, sweet kid. And he values his church membership, his priesthood in the church. And I said, hey, put your computer away and time to go to bed. He says, okay. And so he goes to bed. I go to bed. The next day, him and I take off, run some errands. I come home and she confronts him. And she says, he left his laptop on his bed. And I didn't know why. And she goes, why, Jared, why is your laptop on your bed? And he goes, because I laid it there after I charged it. She's like, but wait, you told me that you were doing your, whatever. So she starts going through this whole dialogue about, well, you told me you were at the kitchen table and your backpack was over there. And she starts just confusing him. And she starts berating him and belittling him in the same way she would me. And then she accuses him of doing inappropriate things in the middle of the night, watching pornography. And he finally looked at her and he goes, I don't do that. She goes, you're lying to me. I know you do that. And he actually said, no, you're lying. It's the first time he goes, you're lying. I don't do that. And then she started in. And now I'm looking at my kid who's 6'3" and he's got tears in his eyes because she's confusing him and his answers aren't making sense. He's getting confused and he's double backing because he's seriously confused. And I sat there on the couch and I was looking at this and I finally said in my brain, that's it. This woman is toxic. I've got to get myself away from her. And I grabbed my son and I said, you know what, son, let's just go. I'm going to take you home. I took him home. Later that day, her and I went on a lunch date. And I told her I believed my son. She got totally pissed at me. But that was the defining moment where I connected the dots with she's treating me the same way, or she's treating him the same way she's treating me. Again, still not knowing anything about narcissism. And then after that, he never came back. So then it took 2 months for me to move out. So moving forward, in April of 2021, I had had enough. And I told her that I wanted a temporary separation. I thought she loved me. I thought she wanted to work things out. She immediately gets on the defensive and says, her response to me was, so that's it, it's over. So me and my kids are your collateral damage. I'm like, your kids, they're adults. Like her daughter was about to graduate high school. Her son was 22, living out of state.
Playing the victim.
Yeah, total victim. So I end up moving out, stayed with a friend. She agreed to a temporary separation. She agreed that she wanted to work on the marriage. Now, we had been in marriage counseling for the 6 months prior. I forgot to mention that. Talk about triangulation. She picked a therapist. I never got a chance to meet her. She controlled every therapy session. And I know the story that they go to therapy for one reason, to triangulate you to the therapist to be on their side. It's exactly what happened to me. So we were in marriage counseling for about 4 or 5 months before the separation. So I move in with I go out and spend, I'm living with a friend. We lived in a house that we had been renting for 12 years. And I paid for all the bills, even though she had a job. We could go on financial abuse. My money was ours. Her money was hers. That's another whole story. Sorry. So I'm paying the rent. I'm paying all the bills, even during the 3 months, the 3 month separation. So April, May, and June 2021, we are separated, and we're going through marriage counseling classes. We are, or sessions, and we're going on date nights, believe it or not. But from the moment, again, I don't know anything about narcissism. I got to keep saying that. So, but the weird thing was, from the day I moved out, and I'm still paying all the bills, and I'm still on that lease, and I'm legally every right to go back to my house if I want to. From the day I moved out, she would never let me come in the house. I was not allowed to come in the house. And me being the nice guy, the empath, I was thinking I was respecting her wishes, and I never went in the house. And so, but the first time I realized that I remember it was a super hot day. I had gone there to pick some stuff up. She met me outside early on in the separation, and I asked her, it was hot. My hydro water bottle was empty. And I said, hey, I'm going to go in the house and fill up my water, the Sparkletts water that I was paying for. And she looked at me and she goes, oh, no, it's okay. I'll do it. And I said, wait, what? I said, I can't go back. I can't even go in my own house. And she snapped her head around at me. Mask completely came off. And she goes, you don't live here. And I was like, whoa, wait. I said, I'm still on this lease. It's still my house too. She goes, well, I didn't invite you in. Now I got my buddy waiting in the car. So I'm like, whatever. She gets my water. She comes out. She says to me, oh, by the way, I found a cigar in Jared's room. So he's smoking cigars. And I go, no, he's not. Jared's never. And I don't. She goes, well, either he is or you are. I go, neither of us smoke cigars. Like, even if I'm whatever. And I go, well, go get it. Let me see it. Well, I'm not going to show it to you. I'll send you pictures of it later. Now I had to go. So I go. She sends me a picture of a dried up cigar in a sandwich baggie on the floor next to his bed. I remember my mom a few months before had given me a box with high school memorabilia. That cigar was the cigar my dad passed out 50 years ago when I was a baby. I called her and I told her what it was. And I said, put that cigar back right now. This is what it is. And she goes, it's too late. I already destroyed it. I'm like, what? She goes, I wanted to make sure there were no drugs in it. Now, at the time, whatever, when I'm writing my book, I realize, wait a minute. I know what's going on with that cigar. She fucking planted it. Mm-hmm. I know for a fact that cigar was in the box in my son's closet. I know for a fact that my son and I had been in that bedroom 100 times before I moved out. I always spent time with my son in his room. You don't think we would have noticed the cigar laying on the floor where she took the picture of it? I know for a fact she was cleaning out his room because she never intended on me coming home, packing up our shit.
Yep.
So I know for a fact that she found that cigar in that box, put it on the floor, took a picture of it. First false accusation.
Yeah. And she brought that up too to shift the blame. She brought that up at that very moment to shift the blame off of something that she didn't want you addressing with her. Now, was there something in the house that she didn't want you to see? or was it just a controlling thing at that point?
It was a controlling thing because she was starting to lose control of me.
Okay.
So now she had to take control of the separation and of the divorce. And on top of that, she's packing up our belongings. So she doesn't want me to see she's doing that.
Okay.
And now that story is fucking, I got so many, this story. So, but during the separation, we're going on date nights and she's dangling the carrot of hope. You can kiss me on the cheek. You can hug me. She would not say she loves me. All this different stuff. Finally, I'm going to say this date because it's very important. June 3rd, 2021, we go on our final date night. We had a really fun bowling date night. She got all dressed up, skin tight top, skin tight jeans, never like the other dates, hair and makeup on point. She pretended to have fun with me and even texted me the next day how much fun she had. I later saw on her bank records, this is June 3rd. She hired her divorce attorney on May 25th, 2 weeks before. Talk about manipulation at its finest. She knew she was going to divorce me.
She was getting off on that part of it too.
She had it all planned. This was her plan throughout the whole separation. And so now we come to, this is crazy shit. So we come to June 27th. My dad had passed away on June 13th. I had gone to Arizona and Ohio for his funeral and his burial. I'm gone 2 weeks. I come back and I tell her I need to pick up some tools at my house. She says, what time will you be here? 8 a.m. My buddy's going to pick me up. Okay, see you then. Text messages. I'm excited actually because I thought I'd see her. Things weren't great. Tension was high, but I was like hoping to see her. And so my friend tells me he's running a few minutes late. I text her, he's running a few minutes late. And now she starts questioning me. Well, how late? So, I don't know, like 15 minutes. Well, now that you're going to be late, I have plans. I'll leave your stuff outside, making it seem as if she wasn't home. I just said, okay, I'm pissed, but I'm like, okay. My friend comes and gets me. We go to my house. Now, my house is on the corner of a major busy street. There's a park right across the street, people everywhere, beautiful Saturday morning. I go and pick up my stuff and I'm pissed. And I tell my friend, I make an off comment. I'm just like, man, I said, I wonder if my house key even still works. And he looks at me and he goes, dude, my friend's kind of a hothead. He's like, dude, fuck that. He's like, this is your fucking house. Go see if your key works. I'm like, okay. So I nervously go up to the front door. There's a gate you got to go in. I open the gate. I go to the door quietly. I insert my key. I barely turn it. I realize it works. I pull it out and I leave. I texted her, was like, hey, my exact words were, I think it sucks that you still leave my shit outside. I don't understand what you're doing. It's bullshit. Hell, I could move back in tomorrow if I want to, but I won't. I said that, but I won't because I still have respect for you and care for you. That's all she needed. She was there the whole time. She was looking at me through the peephole. July 1st, I get a call from an attorney. She's filed for divorce. She's filed an ex parte full exclusive use of the home emergency order, which is her wanting a judge to kick me off the lease because she is now in fear for her life. Why? Because I came to get my stuff on that Saturday. I tried to gain entry into the house. And when I couldn't get in, dude, my key worked. I could have walked in, but I didn't. When he couldn't gain entry, he slammed the gate. He became enraged. He was screaming obscenities in the driveway. And I am in fear for my life. And her exact words were, I go to bed every night with my bedroom door locked, wondering if he's going to come back home in the middle of the night and be good on his threats or whatever. Oh, he texted me and threatened to move back in. Doesn't say that I won't, like I said, but he threatened to move back in. The order was completely denied immediately. And I'll tell you why. It's really funny. So the next day I go, yes. So that was, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going ahead. I find out about this later. So July 1st, I get this call from the attorney that she's filed for divorce. I have to be in court the next day for this emergency order. I immediately turn around from work. I go to her ex's house, Jim. He's freaking out. Well, I'm freaking out. What the fuck is going on? I need to borrow his truck. Isn't that crazy? I use his truck. I told her attorney, I'll be there at noon today. Because her attorney said, she said, you can come get your stuff. I said, okay, you tell her I'll be there at noon today. Okay. I go, but I'm smart enough now to call the sheriff's department. And I said, look, I don't know what's going on. My wife just filed for divorce. She's never let me in my house. I'm going to get my stuff. I need a peacekeeping office there. And the sheriff's department in our town, they're kick-ass. I mean, they're amazing. So I go I get Jim's truck. I go to my house and sheriff's deputy's there waiting for me. We go up to the door. And this was the first time I witnessed the two personalities where there might be some borderline. We knock on the door and she's all dressed up, hair and makeup looking good. She's recording me on her phone. And it's like a different person that I've never seen before. And she said, what are you doing here? We exchanged words. I tell her I'm here to get my stuff. Her attorney didn't tell her. I know I got to get through this. I look back at the sheriff's department, a guy, and I said, what now? And he says, come with me. He says, are you going to let him in? She goes, nope. And she slams the door and locks it. She goes, your stuff is in the garage. So I go out to the sheriff's deputy. He runs all the background checks, no warrants, no arrests, no orders of protection on me. Everything's clean. He says, okay, we're going in. And I'm waiting for a female deputy. By this time, she's opened the garage door. And her daughter, who I was extremely close with, won't talk to me to this day, unfortunately. It's very sad. She's manipulated the crap out of her. She's looking scared to death. She's hovering by her mom. The door's open. I walk up with the sheriff's deputy. I don't even notice my son and I's stuff is packed and on the one side of the garage. I'm such in shock. The sheriff's deputy says, are you going to let him in? And she goes, no, we have an emergency order tomorrow, that ex parte order. And he goes, well, that's tomorrow. That's not today. And he said, there's nothing that says he can't move into his house. She goes, well, are you coming with us? And he said, yes, this is the most bizarre part. The second she let me go, I got to go in the house. The second I crossed that threshold, she switched back. She was immediately kind and nice to me and helpful to me. And I was like, what? And my buddy, who is another buddy I haven't told you about, he's with me and he knows her really well. And he's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is she acting like so, right? So I walk straight back to my son's room and it's completely remodeled. It looks like a Ramada Inn. New furniture, all his shit's gone. This took her a long time. This is 12 years of a household of stuff, right? I look at her and I go, wow, you've been planning this for a while. And she didn't say anything. We finally get out of there, get all my, and then that's when I walked in the garage and I looked at, that's when I see all of our stuff carefully, neatly packed, like you were moving, not thrown on the street, it's carefully packed. We load up my stuff, we leave. The next day I go to my attorney and I, pay the retainer and I'm sitting there and my paralegal says to me, have you read her declaration? I said, no. It's been one day. I'm like, no. She goes, well, it's in your portal. I said, okay. She goes, well, she's accused you of domestic violence and abuse. And I just, dude, I just slumped over in the chair. I put my hands in my face and I started bawling. And I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. And I looked at her and I said, you have to believe me. I've never abused anyone or anything in my entire life. You believe me, right? And it was a female paralegal and she came around and she rubbed my back and she said, Mr. Buggle, based upon your reaction, we believe you. And she said, don't worry, we deal with this a lot and we will protect you. Do you know this woman who I had no kids with, didn't own a home, didn't have a property, didn't own a business, a divorce that could have been handled in 3 days, cost me $40,000 in attorney's fees and 8 months of pure hell because she's a fucking narcissist. And that's what all the lies started and all the discards started. And that's when I started to feel the panic attacks. And that's when I started to feel the trauma bond. And that's when I was like, just, sick. I was sick because I couldn't understand. I knew that I had done nothing wrong. I knew that I had been nothing but no, I'm not perfect. I'm human. I'm flawed. I made mistakes in the marriage, but they weren't marriage ending mistakes. Now I find out later she's accused me of cheating on her, that I'm hiding income and all this. She put me through discovery in court. So I put her through discovery. The narcissists are so entitled, they don't think you're going to make them do the same shit. She was so hell-bent on her righteousness that I was hiding income through my DJ business that I was not. I disclosed everything. She made me do discovery. I didn't even know what discovery was, but I did it, and it showed nothing. So I talked to my attorney. I'm like, well, can I make her do it? They're like, yes, if you want to. I said, okay. I find out through her discovery, she's lying about her income. She's been having side jobs going on, making like $900 more a month.
Projections.
Right. Everything she accused me of, she was doing herself. The cheating thing. So now we're going back to Jim. And now we're going back to her first husband, who I haven't even talked about. Her first husband, she was married to for less than 2 years, only knew his name, and he was abusive. He put a gun to her face or her head or whatever. She told Jim and I the same variations of the same story. Well, I ended up finding him for the book. That's the bombshell in my book. There's a whole chapter on him. Him and I talked on the phone for 4 hours. The stories he told me are insane. And so when I found, so I lost the ADHD, damn it, I lost my train of thought. But so I found the first husband. I've talked about him a little bit, but one of the things he told me, now this is the pattern. So one of the things he told me was he had come home from a business trip. It was his last straw. He caught her on AOL chat back in the day in the 90s, having an inappropriate conversation with a man. And turns out that man was Jim. Jim told me, he goes, she was telling me she was divorced. They were childhood, like grade school kids. And so now she's having inappropriate conversations with Jim while still married to Matt. Then she's cheating on Jim with me, which I know I did too. But then she comes to me at the end of our marriage before I ever moved out. And she's in school trying to get her teaching credential. And she says she's suddenly in a rush to get her degree. She's suddenly telling me that she needs to get her degree in 2 years instead of 5. And I need to do more around the house. I'm already doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the laundry, plus my full-time job and side DJ gigs. And she's working a full-time job and studying in the bedroom with the door locked for one class. I got to get to that. Sorry. She had a rule that when I come home from work, if the bedroom door is wide open, her office where she's studying for school for one class, if the bedroom door is open, I can come in and say hi. That just means she's doing homework. If the door is cracked open, I have to knock first because that means she might be taking a test and she'll allow me to come in or say no. If the door is completely shut, do not knock. Do not tell me you're home unless someone's bleeding or dying. Don't say a word. If you're coming home, don't say hi. If you're leaving, don't say bye. So one day, the door was cracked. Following her rule, I knocked on the door, said, hey, Tammy, I got a question. She lit up, freaking lit me up, yelling and screaming. I can't believe you would bother me. You know the door was shut. I'm like, no, gaslighting. No. I'm telling you that because of the cheating. Who in their right? Who is in the bedroom every night with the door shut or cracked for one class from 4 p.m. till 10 p.m. for one class? What's she really doing in there? But I'm too stupid to not notice it. And then I come home for dinner. I come home from work, and she starts telling me about this male staff worker she works with is, having an affair with another female staff worker. And he's always coming by my office and he's always flirting with me and blah, 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 blah. But I can't believe it. I know, she tells me who it is. I know the guy. And she's like, and he's having this affair with this female staff worker. And he keeps texting me, asking me for advice on what he should do. And I said, well, who's the female staff worker? She wouldn't tell me. She refused to tell me who the female was, but she told me who he was. And so it wasn't until later on, I'm writing the book, when I came across this quote that said, learn to observe. Narcissists will also often tell on themselves by telling stories about other people when it's really them they're talking about. So now I think back. The first husband coming home with the AOL chat, Jim and me, her suddenly remember needing to be in a fast rush to divorce Jim and get with me. then her suddenly needing to go back to school. And now she's telling me about this guy who's having an affair with someone I don't know, and rushing, and you put it all together. And I'm like, holy shit. It's the pattern. She's been the one having the affair, whether it was physical or not. I have no proof, but there's a pattern.
Either way, full of lies and nonsense. So,
and what's crazy is I randomly ran into the guy just a few months ago. That she still works with him. We were at an awards banquet for my son who won this big prestigious senior award. And he was there from a different high school. And he came up to me, and I wasn't expecting him to come up to me. I didn't even realize it was him because I was kind of friendly with him, but I wasn't friends with him. And when he came up to me and I looked at him and he told me who he was and it was him, I just turned white, but I held it together. And I told him about the book, and I told him about some stuff, and he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I read people's body language. And then I tested him. And when I went to say goodbye, I shook his hand really hard. I looked him right in the eye and I said, one more thing. And I said, she accused me of cheating on her, but I didn't. I believe she was cheating on me. And at that moment, when I was saying that, his shoulders dropped. He couldn't look me in the eye. His mouth dropped, and he looked completely dumbfounded. And so I had my answer. I mean, again, am I wanting that answer? I don't know, man. But I ran out to the parking lot and started hyperventilating. I can tell you that.
The bitter truths are better. Bitter truths better.
Yeah. And what does it matter now? Like, that's what I had to remind myself. It's like, what does it matter? It's over. We're done. But there's still that little bit of trauma bond where you just, it's so hard to explain to people if they've not been through it. Why do I care? I shouldn't care, and I really don't care, but sometimes I do care, because she sure as shit doesn't care about me. I'm just another mistake. I'm just another guy she used up, and, I'm just a monthly payment on a Venmo.
Yeah, I mean, another person that she can use as the bad guy in her story, where she's simultaneously the hero and the victim.
Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing is she's on the number 4 before the divorce was final. And the crazy thing is his name is Jim too. And he looks exactly like me. People think he's my long lost twin. And she's immediately in love with him and doing the same shit. So again, I don't care, but it's just this poor guy. And what do? He's going to have to figure it out on his own. That's just the way it goes. So I found out about narcissism through the discard. During the discard, I started listening to different podcasts because I was at my wit's end, and I was just like, I need to figure this out. I needed to know why. I needed to know how could another human being treat someone like this? Can you still see me okay, or I need to turn the light on?
No, you're still good.
Okay. So I started listening to podcasts, and this woman was on. It was called the Armchair, something. The Armchair, and they were talking about narcissism, and I didn't know anything about that. And then when she started talking about the abuse cycle, she said love bombing, devaluing, discard. It's not linear. The repetitious stage, they can go back and forth between love bombing and devaluing, back and forth. And that kind of woke me up, and I started to realize that the love bombing sounded really familiar, and that's what kind of perked my interest. And when I got home from this business trip, I just started YouTubing everything I could find. And I started going through the checklist and the grandiose, the overt, the malignant, the vulnerable, I know is associated with covert, but I couldn't find like the answer. And then I was watching this guy. I don't even remember his name. It was called Female Covert Wife, Narcissist Wife. And when he was 18 minutes long, and when he was talking, it was like he was talking to me about my marriage. Every single thing. There wasn't one thing that he said that wasn't true about her. And that's when the light bulb went on. That's when I joined the Facebook group. That's when I got all my answers. And then that's when my healing began. And the book came about because while I was going through all that trauma and wanting to reach out to her, like I already explained, my friends and family were like, you need to journal. Dude, I hate to read. I've never written a book, but this is one hell of a book, let me tell you. And they're like, you need to journal. You need to just like write your feelings down. Because I wanted to contact her, right? I wanted to call her and text her and email. And I had already tried and she didn't respond. And so now I'm just like, what do I do? So I started just in real time during the discard. I started to go back to the separation, and I wrote her a 16-page goodbye letter that I never sent to her. And this turned into 16 pages. And when I sent this to like my mom and my family and a few close friends, they were all like, you write really well. Like this, the way you express your emotions is crazy. Have you ever thought of writing a book? And I never took anyone seriously. I'm like, no. And then I finally read it to my therapist, who I'd been with since 2015. And when he read the letter, he was in tears. And he was like, wow. He's like, have you ever thought of writing a book? I'm like, everybody's telling me that. So that's when I got serious. I opened a Google Doc and I just started writing. Vomit. And I didn't start with my childhood. I just started from where I was. And then once I started from where I was, I kind of went back to how this could have happened and all this stuff. And this turned into a 14-month process. And then one of my old bosses, I wanted the title to be, it's on the back, but I wanted the title to be My Road to Self-Discovery Through the Loss of Love and da-da-da-da. And my old boss, who's a buddy of mine, he looked at me and he goes, it should be third time was not a catch. I thought that was hilarious. Well, I changed it to third time was not a charm. And anyway, the Goodbye Tammy is in there because my content editor, when she read the book, the manuscript, first thing, they couldn't believe it was real. They're like, my publisher was like, is this a true story? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, holy shit, like this is good. And they said, first of all, we're really sorry this happened to you, but whatever. She said, I love your ending, but what we should do is change your ending so it's not the ending and put the goodbye letter at the end. So that 16-page goodbye letter is the last chapter of the book. And it's like 262 pages. And it goes through all my marriages briefly, everything. But then the last 2 or 3 chapters is a study on narcissism, and it's how to get help and healing and, you know, the different types and the signs and the symptoms and talks about everything. Everything I've learned, which I'm still learning, but everything I've learned to date is in this book. And that's why it's Goodbye Tammy, Third Time Was Not a Charm, Surviving Narcissistic Abuse. And I don't know if you can see it, but I got my very first printed copy the other day.
Pull it back a little bit because there's a little bit of glare.
Sorry.
That's a little better. Okay, yeah, there you go.
There we go. So I designed the cover. It's under a pen name of Theodore Teddy Bowers, but this is the book. And I can't believe it. Oh, and other big news. I will be featured on an HBO documentary called Empathy Not Included. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, no, I have not heard of that.
By Mark Vicente. You can follow them on Instagram, Empathy Not Included. They've been working on it for 2 years. It's going to have Dr. Ramani on it.
Oh.
Another famous psychiatrist, I can't remember. They're going to have 2 self-aware narcissists. They have 2 female survivor stories and 2 male survivor stories. I was the last one to be interviewed for it. I just did more filming last Saturday, but I filmed back in May, and it's coming out early 2024. They're at the tail end. It's going to be huge, like a 2.5-hour documentary, and I'm in it. So
how about that? And what's it called? The HBO documentary called Empathy Not Included?
Yes.
How did they find you from that?
Well, through Dimming the Gaslight, Max podcast. I was episode 16. If you guys want to hear that, listen to that. I'm episode 16. I think they actually wanted him to be on. They asked him because they would listen to his podcast, and he's, can't show his face and stuff. And so he's like, no. And they're like, well, I think they listened to and he kind of told me, hey, you should get in touch with these guys because your story is pretty powerful, and they're looking for male survivors. So I reached out to them. I emailed them. It took several months. I think it took several months. Long story short, they finally contacted me after I submitted my story and said, hey, we were interested in your story. I got on a couple Zoom calls, and I just took on from there. I basically just told them the story I told you. And they rented me an Airbnb house, and, yeah. Oh my God, the most major thing, and I won't go through every detail. There's a chapter in there called The Infamous Vehicle. This is a newer Tahoe that I had bought for her. That's a gorgeous Tahoe, 2011, but it was the Garage Princess. And she kept it all through our separation, and I was the only one on the loan, but we're both on the title, right? Well, she wouldn't give it back. And she refused to give it back to me, and I had to take a share. And it had gotten to the point where I'd tried several times through my attorney. I finally told her, you can keep it. Just take over the payments. I don't care. Just take over the payment. I'm not going to pay for it. No response. She refused to pay for it. Then I come to find out through Jim, It's parked on the driveway, took the license plates off, cleaned all of her stuff out, and emptied the tank of gas. It's sitting there for 3 weeks covered in dirt. And this is a beautiful Tahoe. And I finally took a sheriff's deputy over there, took 5.5 hours. She left. I towed it when she wasn't home, and I got it. And because I took it back, did not see her. She wasn't home. In retaliation, she filed a domestic violence restraining order against me. And she said in her thing that the sheriff's deputy that was there for peacekeeping witnessed the abuse. I mean, my God. The temporary order was denied. I still had to go to the hearing. Me and my attorney, I never said one word. And she started talking, and the attorney, or the female judge, was on my side. I mean, it wasn't on my side. My female judge was like, the burden of proof's on you. She had no proof of evidence of anything. It was just her words. She actually literally said, he drives by the house and looks at the house. And the judge says, well, this is how they abuse the court system, by the way.
Yep.
And the judge says, well, what did he say to you, or what did he do to you or say to you when he drove past the house? She goes, well, nothing. I'm not out there. And the judge goes, that's not abuse. So we go through all this, and then she gets to the time where I took the item, which was the Tahoe, and the judge finally is like, well, so he entered your jointly owned home, because I was allowed to go in there, with a sheriff's deputy and took your item. They never said Tahoe. And she goes, yes. Again, what did he say or do to you when he was in the house? Well, nothing. I wasn't there. His friend staked me out from across the street, and when I left, they took it. She yelled and she slammed her fist and said, this is not abuse. She turned to her computer and she read her the California state law on what domestic and violence abuse is. I was actually embarrassed for her. At this point, by the way, halfway through our divorce, she had fired her attorney. She was representing herself now. So she's by herself. She lost her attorney.
Does she know about your book? Do you know?
Oh, yeah, she does.
And what was her reaction to that?
That she knows. What's that?
What was her reaction to that? Did it give her negative supply, positive supply?
I have no idea. I have no contact with her. All I know is that she knows about the book and she knows about the documentary. We'll see what happens.
And the documentary, that's going to have Dr. Romney and another doctor on there too.
Yeah, I can't remember who he told me. I'm sorry. There's going to be another major doctor on there.
And then 2 self-aware narcissists. I may know who they are. Do you know who they are?
Yeah, it's the black guy with the dreads.
I know him. Yeah,
his name. Yeah, I think he's going to be on there, and I think it's not Spirit Narc. Oh, it's that chick, Milkshake.
Cluster B Milkshake.
Cluster B Milkshake. She's gonna
I've interviewed her. She's been on here.
Okay, yeah, I've seen her videos. I guess she's on there, and then I think 1 or 2 females and 1 or 2 males.
See, it's a wild thing. It's catching on right now. I thought you were going to say it was the nameless narcissist. I thought you might say it was going to be him, but it was not him.
It might be. I apologize. I don't know.
No, it probably wasn't him.
I've been very just kind of going by what they say. I don't ask too many questions.
That's pretty cool, though. I didn't know that was even a thing. I didn't know you were going to be on that.
Yeah, it's going to be. Yeah, I am going to be on that for sure. And one of my passions is I'm an off-roader. I'm a Jeeper. So I've got a lifted Jeep it's like a rock crawler. And they contacted me 2 weeks ago. They're like, hey, we want to do some B-roll filming of you in your Jeep. I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. So we had a production this last Saturday, and we went out to the mountains by my house, and my buddy Tony went with me in his Jeep, and they filmed me for 6 hours doing driving shots and all kinds of cool shit, and then retrospective views. They did another little interview, outside the Jeep, and it was like 6 hours. And Mark Vicente was there, which is totally cool. He's the main director. And
I've heard that name too.
What's that?
I've heard that name.
Yeah, you can. He's on Instagram as Mark Vicente, but then he's also Empathy Not Included is the actual documentary site.
Good name.
Yeah, he's a big name, and they were the most amazing crew to work with. They were just awesome. And it went really well last Saturday. They're about to wrap it up, and they said it should be out early 2024. So we'll see. So and he said, you're going to cry when you watch this. What's that?
5 months.
Yeah. So it's going to be pretty cool. So, that's my story, man. I'm still in the healing. I'm still trying to make sense of everything. But the last thing I want to say, though, is, on the positive note, is life is good now, man. Life is good after a narcissist. It takes time to heal, but you can get there. I did, and I never thought I'd be where I'm at today. I have a great job, career. My DJ business is flourishing. I've got people, friends, and family who love me and support me. I know not everyone may have that, but the biggest thing I can say is learn to love yourself. One of the most powerful things my therapist said to me was create a new mantra. You know, I used to have, in my old apartment that I lived in before I moved to my new one, I had Post-it notes all over the back of the door, my mirror, my bathroom, my kitchen cabinets. And they were just little things that I wrote down. You are strong. You are good. Have a great day. You are powerful. You are a good man. That was one of the big ones. You are a good man. And I would just look at these in the morning because, you know, you wake up not feeling so great when you're in this. And so I repeat that self in your head, affirmations, you know, and that's what really helped me. So yeah, you just need to learn that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, the power of mindset is humongous. And it's also important to note that it does get better. Like this too shall pass. A lot of people, they have a hard time seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But you're a good example of, yeah, there is some light. And you've got some powerful messages here too. You made a book out of it. You turned your wounds into wisdom. And then you got invited on to the HBO documentary. And not that this will happen to everybody, but it's a good example of hope of what can happen if you do something with it.
Absolutely. And you just said the mind is a powerful thing, right? Well, that's how we found ourselves in there in the first place. If the narcissist was able to train your brain to be in the trauma bond and to you know, believe everything they said, your brain is powerful enough to unwind that.
And that's why, even from listening to your story, right, I always say, when you practice radical self-respect, like there's all these moments in there where you would say, you know what, I wouldn't accept this, I wouldn't accept that. And then it's not enough just to know something's a red flag. You have to act on it. And then you have to do something. And I say that because if there's someone's listening out there and what he said is describing a partner of yours, it's not enough just to be aware. You got to do something with it. You got to either place a boundary or, in the case of a narcissist, usually get the heck out of there. Like those are the options. But being aware of something is only half the battle. And it's useless unless you act on that knowledge.
Right. And then I have a question for you, because this has been, and this is probably on opinion, but I hear so many different points of view that like narcissists are evil and they're the devil and they're this and that. And I don't believe that. I believe that they can do evil things. They're very cruel. They're very mean when they're exposed for who they truly are. And that brings me to one point where, you know, the narcissist avoids you, and she avoids me now, right? She avoids me. And it's what I've learned is it's not because she believes that I would actually do the things she falsely accused me of. She knows that I know. They know that you know. So she knows that I know who she truly is, and she doesn't want the truth getting out. So she avoids me at all costs. But at the end of the day, I don't wish any ill will upon her. I don't hate her. I don't want her to die or be in an accident, because that's who I am. I'm an empath. I don't wish that upon anyone. But sometimes I read these comments about they should die and they should this and they should that. And she's a bad person. And I know where she gets it from. And I'm not going to go into her childhood trauma. It's not my place. That's her place if she ever wants to talk about it. I know where she gets it from, but I don't believe they're evil, horrible, demonic people. I think that they've suffered trauma at some point in their life, and they made a subconscious decision in their brain to go that way and to invent the fake persona, invent the fake life, mask the pain, hide that inner child, hide that inner demon. But then when they feel rejected, when they feel abandoned, because that's what it comes down to. She felt rejected by me. I moved out. She felt rejected by me, which was what happened to her in her childhood, partly. So now that inner child comes out and says, he's now enemy number one. We have to get rid of him because he hurt you. Right. And so I get it now. I understand it.
Well, think of it like this. They're like an emotional 5-year-old, right? And something happened in their
Yep.
life when they're growing up as a kid, and there's trauma involved. And I also think there could be a genetic component involved a
Me
lot of
too.
times too.
Me too. I've seen the
And
brain scans.
yeah, and it's a combination. It's a combination of the trauma, and the causes can be many different things. It can be neglect. It can be
Mhm.
spoiling. It can
Golden
be
child.
idolizing, golden child syndrome, all of that stuff. I don't think there's any one cause, and I don't think there's any one solution either. But what happens in adulthood is they just go subconscious. So when someone criticizes them, for example, it hits on that pain in them, and they get very defensive. They're very sensitive to criticism,
Yep.
and then just blurt things out. Now, I don't think they're evil. I think it's more like it's a trauma response plus bad choices sometimes.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I would say, because if you know Dr. George Simon, he talks about it's a character problem too, because many of them do know what they're doing. It's not like they're totally unconscious of it. They know it, but they don't know what to do about it, for one.
Right.
And then they don't recognize and admit the issue. So they just keep on doing what they're doing. And they're amused by it in some ways. Like, oh, I'm a master manipulator. Or, oh, of course I do this, this, and this. Look at how many people I get jumping from one foot to the next. Like how she'd be criticizing you or criticizing your son. Like they do enjoy that. And they know, yeah, there's something maybe not quite right with me. But the character part is not really trying to get to the bottom of it. So it's like, if you know that, then you got to do something about that. You got to have some element of character in there where you say, you know what? I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to be a destructive force in this world. So what do I do about it? And what to do about it is learn to admit when you're wrong, learn to admit and take accountability, and then try to do better in the future. No, the only real apology is changed behavior. And there is a self-aware narcissistic community. I forget the guy's name with the dreads, but I see him on TikTok all the time.
I can't think of it either, but
whatever his name is, we both know who we're talking about. But it is possible, right? They show it is possible if they can admit they have a problem and then try to do something about it. But that is a big if. So I don't want to give anyone any false hope. Oh, maybe my ex will do this. They'll be like that self-aware narcissist. It's like, no, believe their actions first and foremost. Like if they're not doing anything differently, chances are they're not going to change. Nothing changes, nothing changes. So I don't think it's evil. And I think the appropriate response for most of us is gratitude that it's not us.
Yeah.
Gratitude that we didn't develop that response. And that's not to say that they're innocent. It's not to say that they're off the hook for their behavior. The behavior is still wrong, but more than one thing can be true at once. It's like, they're doing some bad things, but they're not evil. It's not an evil thing. They're probably making some bad choices, and they're stuck at that emotional 5-year-old level. And when you're stuck at that level, it's hard. It's hard to break free. And I don't know if every narcissistic person is capable of breaking free even. I think the less severe ones have a better shot. But the more severe ones, I mean, that's hard. That's hard.
I don't think she will ever admit to anything.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
She blames everybody for her problems, and then she plays the victim in a masterful way.
Yeah, blame shifting. They can't.
Yes,
if they can't take responsibility, nothing's going to change.
Right. In our spousal support hearing, my attorney called me the day after, and she was like that was the worst display of victimhood I've seen, and she's been doing this 32 years. I mean, she looked differently. She acted differently. She was so prim and proper, and she totally played the victim in our spousal support hearing. And she didn't get what she wanted. And, that just enraged her further. But this is the crazy thing too, is that, and I say this in the letter to her, this is where, again, the self-entitled narcissist isn't thinking correctly or straight. Before the divorce ever happened, while I was at my parents' house out of state, and we were in the separation, and I kind of had a feeling that things were not going too well. So I had typed up my own divorce agreement just in case it went this way. I was going to give her everything. All I wanted was my Jeep and my dog, just like her first husband. Isn't that crazy? I just wanted my Jeep and my dog and my personal stuff. I was going to give her 3 times the amount of the spousal support that she was awarded. I was going to give her that new Tahoe free and clear. I mean, that's how gullible I was at the time. I never got to show her that because she pulled the trigger and she did what she did. And thank God for that. And I told her in the letter, I'm like, you could have faked it a little bit longer. You could have just faked it and pretended to be nice to me, and I would have fallen for it. That's how empaths are. I would have fallen for it if she had just called me up and came to me and said, Lay, let's meet at the park or something, and this isn't working. I want a divorce, and will you help me financially? And I would have done it. But the self-entitled narcissist, they think they're so right in their lies. They believe their own lies. She truly believes I abused her. She truly believes I abused her daughter. That was the most crushing. And then I have a 10-pound Chihuahua. She accused me of kicking and punching and throwing the Chihuahua against the piano. It's just insane. But my point is, if she had just faked it, she would have gotten away scot-free, and I would have given her everything, and I'd be regretting it now. But she was so right in her. She was so entrenched in her lies about me, which she will be forever, that she thought, oh, I'm going to get everything because I'm going to do this and try to destroy him. But what she doesn't realize is her first husband, he had a stronger mental fortitude than me and Jim. We had figured that out, especially after talking to him. He was like, fuck you, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to deal with this anymore.
Good for him.
He told me on the phone, his exact words were, this isn't the girl I dated. This isn't the girl I fell in love with. And this isn't the girl I married. This was before I told him my story. He told me his story first, so I wouldn't be biased.
There's a question.
Yeah.
As a codependent person, how do you make sure you're not taken advantage of in the present? Where a lot of codependent people or empath people, they try to give people the benefit of the doubt too much.
Oh, yeah.
They do things like that to their own detriment. So for you, how do you distinguish between the two? Like, how do you know if you're going too far or giving too much credit where it's not due?
It's extremely difficult still. I'm starting to finally set boundaries, and it's really hard to set boundaries. But in some of in my new relationships, if I truly don't have the time to offer that person, or if I truly don't have the ability to do what they're asking me to do, it's okay to say no. And it's hard for me though, because I'm a people pleaser. So look, I have a very small circle now.
I don't have 4 quarters and 100 pennies.
True. I mean, I've got a pretty large circle. I mean, my circle of who I trust is small. I have a lot of friends, but I mean, I have a small and trusted circle, and nobody has really ever tried to take advantage of me at this point now. But I would see it. The thing about it is I see red flags now that I didn't see before.
Now, someone here said, were you on Dr. Laura's show? Is there a woman named Dr. Laura that you know?
I was on her show. How do you know that?
Someone in the comment section said so. And she
said, my God.
Someone said that she called you out on your behavior, if I'm reading it correctly, or you're part of it or something like that.
Not really. Now you got to remember, when I used to listen to Dr. Laura every day. Who is that person that's saying that?
Spirit guide me to truth. Now, maybe I misunderstood the comment.
It's okay, but no, I was on the Dr. Laura show. That's crazy. That was years ago. That was a few years ago. That was when I was in the middle of the trauma bond, like when she first started. So I was blaming everything on myself. I remember calling Dr. Laura, and I explained to her what was going on. And Dr. Laura said to me, she actually did not blame me. And she said she didn't spare him anything about his. She basically said, you got to stop being so hard on yourself.
Okay.
Like, what is this? Like, seriously, like, you tried and did this and whatever. But then at the end, she said, but if you ever think about getting married a 4th time, I highly recommend 9 months of psychological marriage counseling before you do. And then she hung up on me.
Well, the good thing is that 16-page goodbye letter, I think that was probably very therapeutic for you. It was just icing on the cake. You were a good writer with it as well. And then it morphed into the book. But I think everyone who's trying to go no contact with a narcissistic person, or even just a breakup in general, doing that goodbye letter, even if you don't send it to the other person, extremely therapeutic for yourself. And I highly recommend anyone who's struggling, do that. Write that goodbye letter. And you don't have to send it. It's really for yourself, right? And the other good thing you were talking about was letting go of resentment, where like you don't wish her any harm. You don't want bad things to happen to her. And I think that's an important part of the recovery process too. And it's one of the final stages where you let go of that resentment. You look at it in a way that you can be the happiest and healthiest version of yourself today. Because why wouldn't you want to be that, right? People who hold on to resentment, it just hurts them. So I always say that's one of the final stages when you can let go of resentment and be good. Be good, and not that it forgives anything that happened, doesn't make anything that happened right or okay, but you look at it in a way now that it best helps your life.
Correct. That's absolutely right. Yeah. That's crazy though, that somebody said Dr. Laura. That was 2.5 years ago, man. That was like,
hey, YouTube doesn't forget. YouTube doesn't forget.
And you know what's funny? I got a little funny side story on that. So, Jim, her ex and I are really good friends. And his daughter, my ex stepdaughter, her and I were extremely close, and she still won't talk to me to this day. It's very sad. But he told me that he picked her up for something that day. And Dr. Laura repeats the episode right after. He goes, she literally got in the car and I was on at that moment. What are the chances?
No coincidence. She
said to her dad, she goes, is that Doug? And he goes, no. And he shut off the radio. He's like, dude, you were on like the second she got in the car. And it's just a funny story. I'm like, what are the chances of that? But I mean,
I don't believe in coincidence.
That's true. Well, he wanted to protect her from it. But you got to remember, at that time, I was blaming everything on me. I was boo-hooing to Dr. Laura. I was like, it's my fault. It's my fault. I love her. I want her back. And da-da-da-da. And Dr. Laura was like, you're crazy. Like, this woman is obviously like toxic or whatever.
She's telling it to you straight.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, that was crazy. So, about narcissistic rage. I have one story where this was the first time I had experienced it in marriage counseling. So as you probably noticed, I vape nicotine, which I know is not the healthiest thing. But that was my number one crime that she found out. I had to hide it from her, which I'm not proud of, because remember, she still pretends she's Mormon. She doesn't drink alcohol. She doesn't smoke, nothing. And so I was so stressed out and I was unhappy. For a short time, I smoked cigarettes and had to hide it from her. And then I would have an occasional beer with friends after work, which she never knew. I had to hide that from her too. What grown man has to hide that from his wife, right? And so I switched to the vaping. So we were in a marriage counseling session, and I asked her, what is her problem with it? And she said, I don't like codependency. And I already knew where I was going with this. And I said, okay, what is codependency? Oh, don't patronize me. You know that I know what codependency is. I said, okay, you're addicted to Diet Coke. And she freaking raged and started screaming and yelling. I waited until she stopped. The therapist said, let him finish. She was about to hang up. And I said, let me finish. So she listened, and I said, look, I've looked it up. Too much of anything is bad for you, right? I mean, sugar, fast food, Diet Coke's one of the worst things. And I said, there's a study that says one Diet Coke is worse for your body than one beer. With all the chemicals, the aspartame, all that shit in there. She used to drink 8 to 10 Diet Cokes a day. We would go to weddings or parties. She would carry 2 or 3 Diet Cokes in her purse with her just to make sure she could have her Diet Coke. 10 o'clock at night, she would turn on the charm and be so sweet. And babe, I'm out of Diet Coke. Can you go get me some? And I would go. Do you think if I ever asked her if she can get me some Mountain Dew at 10 o'clock at night? Hell no. So as I told her all this, I said, my point is not Diet Coke. I don't care how much Diet Coke you drink. I don't care what you put in your body. Now, if I'm doing drugs or I'm an alcoholic and I'm abusing my family, that's different. I said, I don't care what you drink. What your Diet Coke doesn't bother me. It's your body. My problem is you want to control what I put in my body. It's my body. And I'm a grown man and I can make my decisions. I don't do drugs. I don't smoke weed. I don't do anything else. And she didn't like that answer.
Oh.
And I pierced the armor and she went into a complete freaking rage. And that's just one example. So it's when you actually point out something that they're doing is when they rage at you, and you just got to be like, because they can't handle shame. They can't handle they can't look at their inner selves as doing anything wrong. And so when you point something out, all they know to do is lash out back at you, blame you, turn it on you.
Yeah.
It's your fault.
They think that you're the cause of that uncomfortable feeling that being called out gives them. And nothing makes them more angry anyway than being called out for something they absolutely did.
Right.
So, you catch them cheating and you say, yeah, I caught you cheating. Furious. And then they will attack and gaslight and demean the person that does the calling out.
Right.
And it's like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you see the patterns everywhere.
That's the biggest thing I tell my friends. It's like almost like a curse. It's like once you've learned about narcissism and once you see the red flags and once you know about it, you can't unknow it. You can't unlearn it. You can't unsee it. It's like, and the red flags, I never will use the word victim in my case. It's survivor. As a survivor of narcissistic abuse, I was beating myself up so hard about while I was writing my book, even when we were before the marriage, during the affair, there were so many red flags that I could tell you about. And I just was beating myself up like, why couldn't I see that? Why didn't I see that for what it was? And I was reading something or watching another video of an expert, and they're like, it's because the trauma bond had already developed. And don't beat yourself up. It's not that you wouldn't see it. It's that you couldn't see it. You literally, your brain cannot see those red flags.
Yep.
And now that I'm out of it, looking at it in a clear lens, suddenly all those red flags are there. And now if I meet new people or if I'm around somebody that's acting that way, and doesn't happen a lot, but if I do, I see it. I see it right away. And I'm like, just a comment or a look and I'm not trying to call other people like narcissists, but it's like you suddenly see
the behaviors.
What's that?
You see the behaviors. I mean, regardless of the label, you see the behaviors.
Correct. That's exactly right.
And one thing, I guess a good thing to kind of end here on in a minute is forgiving yourself. What do you have suggestions for people that are trying to forgive themselves? And I can give my thoughts on this too, but what do you think has helped you?
Number one, I have forgiven myself for the affair. Jim has taught me a lot about that. He's just like me, and he forgave me long ago, and it took me a lot longer to forgive myself. Hanging out with him sometimes is because we Jeep together. There's the three of us, and being around him is hard sometimes because it was so long ago, but I'm still sometimes I have to stop myself from being reminded that I played my part but he understands why it happened now. And it's hard being around him sometimes because I feel like, how could this guy forgive me? How could this guy be my friend again after what I put him through and what Tammy put him through, but after what I put him through? He now says I did him a favor, but I mean, it's tough to forgive yourself, but I've reconnected with God I'm a spiritual person. I'm not any denomination. I guess I'm Christian, but I believe in God. During the divorce, there was a moment in the middle of the night, and I hadn't talked to God in, the whole 12 years I was with her. And I was in the middle of the night. I was 2 weeks of deep sleep deprivation. I was at my wit's end. I laid there at 2 a.m, and I spoke to God. And I said, if you are there, please forgive me for what I have done, for what I have caused. I'm asking you to forgive me. And I am laying this burden at your feet. I cannot handle what's happening to me right now on my own. And I felt his presence. I heard the voice. I felt the comfort. And then I said, and the last thing I ask of you, God, is just for rest. Allow me to sleep. And I'm not kidding you. I closed my eyes and I was asleep within 30 seconds. I even have a tattoo right here. It says, love God first.
Very nice.
And so I believe he's forgiven me. And I atoned for my sins. And then from that moment on, it was so weird. From that moment on, it was all in God's timing, and I gave it to him. Getting my Tahoe back should have taken me 20 minutes. It took 5.5 hours. I was frustrated at the time. Why is it taking this long? It was all in God's timing. Everything in the divorce went my way through God's timing. And I continue to pray to this day, and I continue to talk to God, and I have conversations in the car, and and I just thank him. And I think me forgiving myself has a lot to do with God forgiving me. And I know not everyone's religious, and I know not everyone believes, and that's okay. I respect all people's religions and views and whatever, but you have to find that peace within yourself, and you have to be able to say, I'm not a bad person, but I made a bad decision, and I was caught up in something that was not normal of my character. I've never done it again. I will never do it again. And I'm a good person that made a very bad decision. But at the same time, if I hadn't made that bad decision, I don't know if my cycle of wanting the approval from women would have ever stopped. Tammy did me a favor in the end. Tammy did me a favor by making me take a look at myself and go, this cycle needs to stop. I recognize the problem. I stopped the problem. And now where do I go from here? Right. And so I now go and look at things in a different way. And she actually did me a favor by not only making me take a look at myself and being a better person, she also forced me to study a topic I didn't know anything about, which is narcissism.
Yeah.
And how people behave. I've learned more about the human psyche and the brain and the fight or flight response and the chemicals in our brain, the dopamine, the oxytocin, all the serotonin. I've learned so many things about the human brain that I never even cared about learning. Could care less. If you said to me, what's oxytocin or what's serotonin 5 years ago, I've been like, I don't know. What's that? Yeah. But I know it now. And it's good information to have. I mean, it's And
I would say this too. I hear a lot of people share something similar to what you just did, where they seek guidance from some sort of higher power. Doesn't really matter which religion, but once people do that, a lot of times they do get guided in the right direction. I hear that story a lot,
right?
Not just in religious circles, sometimes at NA and AA stuff. They'll have very similar stories where they just have the humility to ask for help, a higher power, meaning whatever, whether it's God or something. It's helped a lot of people. And I would be remiss to not bring that up and say, hey, if you're really struggling out there, maybe try to seek out something higher than yourself, bigger than yourself. And what's the worst that could happen?
Right, exactly.
Happen, I would say. And then two, for forgiveness, like no one's perfect, right? No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. And I think one of the things that's probably helped you on your forgiveness journey is all of the things you're doing to give back, right? You've turned the wounds into wisdom. You wrote the book. You went on the documentary. You're coming on shows like this. And I think when you do that, you share your story, you share your experience, it kind of gives meaning to the experience for you, right? It gives you meaning when you're talking about it and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, basically. And it means that it wasn't for nothing. And it's propelled you on the journey to growth. And now you're able to help all of these people and come into contact with all these people, dimming the gaslight, me, and all those other people that you just never would have before, if not for this experience. And it's like I say, the calm sea never made a skilled sailor. And God sometimes, or whatever you believe, whatever higher power you believe in, it puts these kinds of scenarios in people's lives. And I think it happens to force people to grow. And if people take on that lesson and say, okay, I got to take a look at my side of the street, grow, learn about this here, and then try to help others and give back what I've learned, good things happen. I mean, that's why I'm here. And it wasn't just because of narcissism, I'm here. I'm here for other reasons too. But when you do that process, I think that's the name of the game, baby. And the process will continue in many different ways, right? It might be narcissism this time, but then in 5 years, maybe there's another lesson that you'll be going through. And then you'll be turning it around and helping people on that lesson and talking about that. And I think that's the beautiful process that never ends. So that's how I see it.
Right.
I see it like, yeah, okay, we're going to go through our struggles. Everything has a season. Like there'll be a season of struggle, and then a season of growth and sharing about that struggle, helping others. And then maybe a period of, oh, we're doing pretty good right now, we think.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, before you know it, some other issue pops up again, and we're back in struggle a little bit, like, uh-oh, here we are. And then we got to come through that cycle again. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful when you think about it, what can happen with life. And it's a cool cycle.
It absolutely is. It is. And I'm learning every day. So life is good. I'm blessed in so many ways. And just, I thank you for having me on. And
absolutely,
hope people will order the book, and I will be doing an Audible version of it. I'll read it myself, but that's going to come later. I don't even know when yet. Got to figure out how to do that. But
tell everyone where the name of your book again, and where they can find you, and the name of that documentary.
That's always reversed. Okay, so it is Goodbye Tammy, Third Time Was Not a Charm, Surviving Narcissistic Abuse.
On Amazon or Google?
It's on Amazon. You can go right now. I literally it just came out. You can go to my publisher's website, which is dorrancepublishing.com, DORRANCE. You can go to bookstore.dorrancepublishing.com, or just go to dorrancepublishing.com. It is now on Amazon. I just saw it on there today. It's not quite on Google yet, and it's not at Barnes & Noble yet. It just came out last week. But in the next week or two, it'll be on every format. You can get it in paperback or ebook. So it's there. It's out.
Awesome.
And I'll do an Audible version later. But my cousin just downloaded it today. She just ordered it on Amazon today. It put it right in her Kindle library, and she's already reading it. And she said it looks perfect. So it's good to go. So.
And then the name of the documentary, Empathy Not Included.
Yep, Empathy Not Included. They're on Instagram under Empathy Not Included. Real simple, one word. They don't have a lot of posts on there, but it's a good, and they are giving updates. So Empathy Not Included is the name of the documentary.
Early 2024 will be the release date of that.
Yes, they're just finishing the editing right now. They told me at first they're going to premiere it at the Sundance Film Festival in January. So they're hoping by March it'll be out. So first quarter of 2024, it'll be out.
Awesome. And my pal Cluster B Milkshake will be on there. And Dr. Romney will be on there, along with another doctor that we can't remember their name.
Yeah,
and Lee Hammock was the guy. The chat came through again strong. Lee Hammock is the self-aware narcissist that we were trying to remember but couldn't.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good documentary. It's going to be it's not fun. Oh. I was with Mark on Saturday, and I said, so how do you think this thing's going to be? And he looked right at me and goes, you're going to cry. I mean, he said, your footage is just amazing. And, everyone else's is too. And they've been working on this for over 2 years. So this isn't a little, side thing. It should be pretty big. They've said they've got enough footage to do a series out of it. They are thinking about doing the 2-hour premiere and then maybe doing a series, multiple episodes. They have that much footage.
So they actually show you on camera and you're talking about your story. Do they have you acting at all or anything? Or
I tell my whole story in a sit-down interview, and then they have me my Jeep. They have me pull my Jeep in the garage, take a wheel off, jack it up, pretend to work on it underneath it. While there's stories about her gaslighting me with the Jeep and stuff. So I tell those stories. And the coolest part was the Tahoe. So we brought the Tahoe that I took from her. It was mine, and how she abused the court system. And at the end of the day, they looked at me and said, we don't know what to do with the Tahoe. I'm like, okay. He goes, well, wait, I got a good idea. Why don't we all jump in it and you just drive around the neighborhood and tell us the story again, how you got it back. Tell us about the court, the false, domestic violence restraining order. So we jump in it. The cameraman's right there. It's like you see in any documentary. And I'm driving around these neighborhoods in SoCal and telling the stories again. I had to tell the stories just over and over and over, right? And then that was it was like 9 hours. But it was crazy because I asked him on Saturday, I'm like, out of all this footage, like how much time is each person in it? Because I'm interested. He goes, well, we did one of the female survivors. We interviewed her for 8 hours. She's in it for 4 minutes. And he goes, you're in it for a lot more. He goes, you're going to be in it for at least 10 to 15 minutes.
That's wild.
So after 9 hours on that day and 6 hours last Saturday, I'm going to be in it for 10 to 12 minutes.
It's crazy to know how much work goes into it for just 10 to 15 minutes.
Half
and
the
for
time
that other
you're
girl
waiting
for 4 minutes. And for the other girl, 9 hours of footage.
Right. And half the time you're just waiting for the cameras to be reset up and different setups and different things. So we're just standing around kind of waiting. But
yeah, it's cool to see behind the scenes there and how the whole process works.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's definitely, I mean, I live in SoCal, so I've seen that kind of stuff before. I've never worked in that industry, but I've seen that kind of stuff before. So I kind of knew how it would go.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lengthy process for what you see as a finished product.
Right on.
So,
right on.
Anyway.
Is there anything else you wanted to share here before we close down?
No, I think I've said it all.
All right, my man. Thanks again for coming on. I'm really impressed with your whole story here and your journey. It's very interesting to hear, and it's impressive to see how much you've grown just in the time between episode 16 and episode 90 of Dimming the Gaslights podcast too. So that's all pretty cool.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to listen, this Sunday, episode 90 will drop on Dimming the Gaslight, and I'm on. That's my follow-up episode. So
right on.
Very lighthearted, a little more fun than the first one. So it's good.
Yeah, it was good to see the contrast, right? A little darker.
That's why he did it. It was like the before and after, kind of like, this is good. The life is good now. We can see the updates, what you've learned since. So it's good.
Important to hear. All right, everybody, over and out. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And remember to like the video too. That helps the algorithm. Comment below what you thought about the interview, what you thought about Doug's experience here, or if you can relate, have an experience of your own. We would love to hear it. So with that, thanks again for watching.
Thank you.
Woo!